I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here?
Something to do.
Nothing better on a Saturday morning. That's how they all ended up here. Something to do. Yeah, well, welcome. Another hand somewhere? No? So those of you who keep coming back, sparing the jokes, why? Why show up?
Feel relaxed afterwards and start the rest of my Saturday in a good space.
Yeah.
It's like a shutdown and restart. You don't need to have too many windows open and docs. It's all fragmented and scattered.
Yeah.
Restart and open the most important thing.
Yeah. We should all do like the hard reset, you know? Just clear everything.
Yep.
What else? Why show up? Yeah.
It feels good to be in community, hoping that everybody has good intentions.
Yeah. Most of the people here do. Yeah. I can't vouch for all of them, but most of them. Yeah, I think community, often when people ask questions about why I think people show up here, I always say I think that's one of the biggest reasons is people looking for community, you know, just others with what they would consider similar intentions, you know, and yeah. What else? Anybody want to share? Yeah.
To have other perspective on some issues that may be struggling with, but people look at it differently and we help you to look at it differently so to get some answers.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I like, you know, people sharing, you know, often people will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, I didn't want to ask this question in the group. And usually I then refuse to answer it at that moment and force them to come back the following week and ask it. Because if somebody asks a question, guaranteed there's at least one other person in the room that is thinking the same thing, you know, and just as afraid as the other person to ask it. But, you know, it's always important to share. Yeah.
I'm very prone to escapism, so I'm trying something different where I force myself to face my life.
Yeah, facing our lives. It's not easy, is it? No. Yeah. Anybody else want to share before we sit? And to those joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. Feel free to share why you're here if you'd like. Anyone else before we sit? Yeah.
One thing I really like is how quiet it is.
Me too. I mean, I love when you're all here, don't get me wrong, but my favorite is when this place is empty. Yeah. And then I get to be stuck with what? This thing. But yeah. All right, so we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who might be sitting for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often help slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hands on the knees or lap. If you need to move, simply move. It doesn't make you a bad meditator. Just simply move, return to stillness. I will guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, Recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where is your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. This practice is direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with life as it arises. Life is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. This practice is learning how to face those when they arise with kindness and compassion. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in each moment. And that's the practice. It just repeats. Doesn't change. In my opinion, doesn't necessarily get any easier. It just requires showing up every day and being with life and responding with kindness and compassion in all situations. And that's not easy. But once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. So, with that, I'll pause. For me, really always respond. Prefer responding to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And again, to those who are joining virtually, welcome. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions. Yeah.
My question is more about meditation techniques.
Ah.
Some techniques talk about saying a mantra, either loud or quietly, or chanting, or
Sure.
focusing on the breath. What are the benefits, if there's any advantage of one over the other? Or?
Yeah, I mean, that would be like me telling you what food tastes like. You know? What it tastes like to me is just my own opinion.
Right?
And if you want to know what each thing tastes like,
Just try them yourself.
you got to try them yourselves. I will say this in general, for those who didn't hear virtually, the question about different types of meditation, mantras, things like that. if 1,000 people lead you in meditation, they'll lead you 1,000 different ways.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that any one of them is right or wrong or good or bad. They're different. If somebody tells you to go, jump off a cliff and give you a bunch of money, I'd probably abandon that meditation practice. But I think it's important to find a practice that, your question about what are the benefits, most importantly is, and I've worked with Navy psychiatrists and working with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, things like that. There's so much science around what meditation does to the brain, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, all that kind of stuff. And as I used to always say, I don't care what the science says. If you don't do it, it's not going to help you. And I will say this, though, that when I look very specifically at the Buddhist teachings, Tibetan has some variations of practices, Tonglen, sending and receiving of compassion, lots of guided meditations. There's mantra practices throughout Buddhism. For me, kind of the two core fundamental practices that really have come up for me in Buddhist teachings are shamatha, which is just breath, which is where the Zen practice really abides. The Buddha taught in the Anapanasati Sutta, when you're breathing in, taking a short breath, know you're breathing in, taking a short breath. When you're breathing out, taking a long breath, know you're breathing out, taking a long breath. Meaning, it's just an observation and awareness of sensation of breath. The other practice is vipassana, which is insight. And that is kind of in the same regards, but to become aware and have insight into the sensations of the body, sensations of the mind, sensations of sounds. So vipassana, which translates to insight, and Zen are really kind of the two, dominant's the wrong word, but the two primary practices. Like I said, Tibetan practice has a lot, and it's what I've studied and know the least about. A lot of mantras I think are really beautiful. My master used to say you could recite the Buddha's name, the name of Jesus Christ, or Coca-Cola. And the reality is whatever you recite and chant doesn't matter if you don't practice kindness. So, does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
Jack, I don't know how this question is going to help me, but I felt like there's something in there. When I was listening to Anand interviewed about the practice, one thing she mentioned is the brain and the mind are different things. Can you say anything about?
Sure. Is that it, or is there more?
Well, it's something tied up with impermanent nature that we have.
Yes.
I was wondering from Buddhism perspective, if there's something in it.
Is the brain separate from the
Different things.
The-
Brain and then mind are different things.
mind? Yeah, so the question was that you were listening to a nun's teaching, and the teaching was that the brain and the mind are different things, and then there was also the teaching of impermanence in it. So, depending upon the lineage tradition that was sharing this, what they learned, obviously there's variations to it, but the general idea is that there's what's called a laya vijnana, which is a storehouse consciousness. So, in this teaching that you heard, when the nun was saying mind, my guess is that the mind was referring to this consciousness and this awareness that is always changing every moment, with every, everything we hear, everything we see, every place we move to, right? I mean, we don't realize it, but you're completely different in so many ways from the person who walked in here, 35 minutes ago, right? It might not seem like it, might not look like it, might not feel like it, but we have there were like 1 trillion experiences that just occurred. From the moment you walked in to the moment you sat down. We might just think, well, I just walked in, I just sat down. But you saw things I'm just talking about, forget like when you left home. I'm just talking about when you arrived here. You saw things along the way. You encountered things. You encountered people. You encountered everything to get to this moment right now, like 1 trillion things that happened that you've never encountered before. Even though we might think, oh, it's the same thing. I walked into the Dharma Bum Temple and I sat down. But our mind is different in all of those experiences. So our consciousness is always changing. That's the impermanence of it. I'll talk about mind in a minute, but to expand on that a little bit, for me to put that into practice is one of the things where it actually impacts us is think about things in our lives we've been angry about or upset about, or any grudges, or anyone have any resentments or grudges you've been holding for like 40 years, right? In your mind right now, there is no impermanence to that. It's like this locked, fixed thing, right? Whatever they did 40 years ago was wrong, and my whole life is miserable because of it. And end of story. And you all have that little box, a different variation of that. You know, there was a 14-year-old here the other day, so they didn't have it for 40 years. They only had it for like 5 years, you know. But you're not allowing the impermanence to actually exist in that. You're stuck in that story. And so the consciousness that's always changing, the impermanence that's always occurring, is allowing us to see things differently. And this understanding of impermanence, what it's really getting to me, what it's getting to is the most impermanent thing is us, right? The Buddhist taught that the most impermanent thing, it all starts with the sense of self. That we see the world from our lens, our perception, our view of reality. And that's all we see it from. And we think, I think this is Jeff, and this is me, and this is my body, and this is my mind, and this is whatever. And I create a whole story around that. And the Buddhist teaching says that's all an illusion. It's all just your perception. Because it's ultimately getting into rebirth, really where this question is going from as far as consciousness. Because that consciousness didn't just start the moment you were born. The consciousness is endless. No beginning, no end. So we think, well, I was born and these are my experiences. But the consciousness has been going forever. And then it came together in this life, in this form body. And so I think the consciousness and this body are the same thing. They're not. This body's going to die. The consciousness is going to continue. Forever changing. The hardest part of impermanence is understanding that we are impermanent. We are just physical matter that has come together with consciousness. That's it. And we're attached to these bodies. And these bodies, the Buddha said, you get birth, you get aging, you get sickness, and you get death. That's what we all get. Like it or not, that's what you signed up for. Right? And so it's also super rare, and I'm kind of expanding on this way more than I normally would, but I feel it's important. It's also super rare in this idea of continuation of consciousness and rebirth, that being born as a human is super rare. Like it's super rare. It means you all have really good past karma. How many of you came in here today thinking you have good karma? Like, no, my car broke down yesterday. My karma sucks. Right? Well, you have a human life and the ability to have a car. How incredible is that? You know? Well, my shirt doesn't fit anymore. My shoes are a little bit dirty. You have the incredible privilege and ability to have a shirt and shoes. But we think, oh, poor me. My karma sucks. My life's over. You know, with so many things. So the consciousness has been around forever. Now, the brain just does what the brain does. You know, I mean, I don't study the brain, thankfully. I wouldn't understand it. I could spend many lifetimes saying I wouldn't understand it. But the brain and the functioning of the brain and how we process things is very different from consciousness and the mind that is, I don't know, playing alongside the brain. That's how I see it. But yeah.
So this consciousness and the soul of Atma, or put that in, the only difference is one is changing, other is not supposed to be changing.
So the question is around in the Hindu practice at that time, which the Buddha in essence was raised in, one of the differences was that from the Buddhist teachings was that the belief was that there was an Atma and a soul that would continue on permanently. Right, endlessly. And the Buddha said, no, anatman, I think it says, is no soul. What the Buddha was saying was that the belief that the soul that continued would be, well, normal, that's your soul. And it's you. And you, normal, are going to continue on. Your soul as normal is going to continue on. And the Buddha said, and this is me paraphrasing obviously how I've translated this over the years into my head, it's like, how is that even possible? Because normal in this physical body was born into the family he was born into, into the place he was born into, lived the life he lived, is here now, and at some point in time is going to die. So how could normal continue? All the consciousness, the experiences will continue on and take form in a different body. But that's not normal's.
And they are constantly changing.
Say again, they're what?
And they are constantly changing.
Yeah.
The consciousness.
Always. Yeah. Just a different way of seeing it, you know. But then now Tibetans, you know, with their idea of reincarnation, believe that there's the literal reincarnation of a past consciousness. But yeah, exactly. But the Dalai Lama, you know, as they say, is the literal rebirth of Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, and that, you know, you'll hear stories. There was a play years ago I thought was really cute. It was called I forget the name of it, but it was like some, you know, 30, 40-year-old Midwestern family, and these two Tibetan lamas, monks, show up at their house, and their little 4-year-old child, you know, it's like living, and these lamas show up and they say, your child is the reincarnation of our master, of our Tibetan master, we must take him.
It's little Buddha.
Say again?
Little Buddha. Little Buddha.
You're not talking about the Keanu Reeves one?
Yes.
No, this is different. I know the little Buddha, but what I'm talking about is not that. Yeah. Yeah, that might be part of that. Yeah, I saw that like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Hysterical. Yeah, cute also. Funny to see. Yeah, it's a great movie. But this was a play that was done like 10 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, that's a cute one. That's actually surprisingly a lot of people's introduction to Buddhism was from that movie. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, I hear consciousness and awareness used a lot. And also, in my last question, I'm thinking about thought. But is consciousness like a super amount of awareness?
So my understanding, we're getting into technical terms that, you know, so my understanding, the term alive vijnana storehouse consciousness is a continuation and a collection of all your past karma. So consciousness and awareness are not, to your question, are not the same thing. I am aware that you are asking this question right now, and I'm responding. And that awareness and response is creating this kind of cumulative consciousness that is continuing. It's going into my storehouse. Karma is action. So everything I thought, everything I said, and everything I did, that is my karma. Karma, for those who haven't heard me say this, is not what you get, it's what you give. We generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. So what I think, what I say, and what I do is my karma. My consciousness is just a collection of all karmic activity for endless time, right? Awareness is more, well, I think I kind of said it, but it's just being aware of what's happening in each moment. And that then is kind of creating or adding to this consciousness. What were you going to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about faith.
Faith.
Specifically because one of the things I like about Buddhism is that it doesn't rely on like a hierarchical structure of priests that you need to go through.
Yeah.
And I love how the Buddha says, go figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I find in my practice that there's a point where things get really quiet, but then the mind wants to do something. And it seems like there's a surrender or a faith to just not do anything. Yeah. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, it's interesting, the question around faith. A lot of people, and I'm going to just say this generally to give some context to it, a lot of people come into Buddhism initially because, especially in this culture, if you were raised not in a Buddhist family, which, you know, majority of people in this culture, that's their case. And so a lot of people come into Buddhism later on in life coming from Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism, Mormonism, whatever it might be. And they're like, well, I'm done with that religion. I don't want to have faith. I don't want to believe in a higher power. And so I like Buddhism. And they justify it by saying, again, this isn't your question, but this is just my general spiel on this. They justify it by saying, well, that's a philosophy and a way of life, so they're like, oh, I'm okay with it. As long as it doesn't have that R word tied to it, then I'm good with it, right? Before I even get to your question, I hate to shatter it for y'all. Buddhism is one of the world's oldest, largest religions. And a lot of people are not cool with that when they hear that. It's like, whoa, I don't like religion. Well, that's your hang up, right? That's your shit for not liking it. How many people here are Buddhists? Show of hands. Nobody. Okay, we built this place 18 years ago. I always say I'm a Jewish kid in a Christian church leading a Buddhist temple filled with everybody that's not Buddhist. Right? So the people that come here are not Buddhists, and they're not trying to become Buddhist, but many of them who come here coming out of another religion, and so they're kind of anti-religion. Buddhists has practiced religiously all over the world for over 2,000 years. And if you go to, even locally, it's why I always tell people, go to the Vietnamese temples, the Taiwanese temples, the Lao Cambodian temples. When you go there, you will see, which you've had experience at seeing, you will see what is, to your perception, if you've never seen it, a faith-based religious practice. You will see more ritual in Buddhist temples than you'll see at a Catholic church. All the bowing and chantings and offerings and rituals endlessly. They all exist. They're all there. And they're all beautiful. And I encourage everybody to go experience them. Then you filter all that out to why we created this place, which was to remove all the cultural stuff that comes with Buddhism and just get to the core of what did the Buddha actually teach, right? And yes, what he actually taught was, and let me finish that first thought. For those of you who just think Buddhism is a philosophy and a way of life, great, keep that thought. Buddhists don't really care how you think about it or how you perceive it, but if you go to a Catholic church and tell them that's not religion, it's a philosophy and a way of life, it's kind of insulting. So if you go to Buddhist temples and you tell them this isn't religion, it's kind of insulting, right? Because to them it's very religious. I'll get to the faith part in a minute. And so keeping it as a philosophy and a way of life, to me, that's the practice we share here. People aren't coming here to be Buddhist or whatever, and you already have your religions or lack thereof, keep them, It's actually with the Buddha when he was asked about religion, if they should believe in it, one of the 14 questions he wouldn't answer was, if you believe in, and they asked him about gods and goddesses, actually. And he said, if you believe, the Hindu gods and goddesses, he said, if you believe in them, you do. If you don't, you don't. It's up to you. He said, I'm just here to teach you how to be a kind, gentle, nice person, in essence. So this part about faith, historically, there's tremendous amount of faith in Buddhist practice. It doesn't get kind of filtered down into a Western context. But I can just say from personal experience, my beginning with Buddhism was in Pure Land Buddhism, and specifically in Taiwan, the Taiwanese temple here in Taiwan. And their devout faith-based practice that you will recite the Buddha's name, you will meditate, and chant the Buddha's name, you'll meditate, and you'll follow precepts. And there is 100% faith, no doubt, that you will then be reborn into the Buddha's Pure Land. You cannot convince them otherwise. It would be like trying to, you get the point, but whatever religious beliefs hardcore people have, it's the same. There is the Buddhist Pure Land, and in the Pure Land there is no suffering. So there is faith. My master used to always talk about, at the beginning of Buddhist practice, and this I think very specifically arose when you asked that question, he would say, at the very beginning of Buddhist practice, it's important to have great doubt. Great doubt in the teachings and the practice. Not about in the Buddha himself or in any other higher figure, but in the teachings. Doubt them meaning, if you doubt something, what's the only way to find out? You have to kind of test it, try it, right? I doubt this food's going to taste good, so I have to take a bite and see for myself. So he said, doubt this stuff. The Buddha himself said, don't believe these things just because I'm saying them. Try them, and if they work for you, then put them into your life. So doubt is important. Then I think that there is a point in time, which again, to your question, which has nothing to do with like the Pure Land side of faith, but for me, I have devout faith in these teachings. And that's where I think the faith part comes in. That's where I think the people that may struggle with higher power is, it's not, from the Buddhist lens, in my opinion, it's not about having or not having a belief in a higher power. It's about making sure I don't have belief that this guy knows what the fuck he's doing. Because he doesn't. And if I have faith in the teachings that they are 1,000% smarter, wiser, healthier than any decision this guy would make, then my life will be better. If I could do that all the time, man, that would be great. but I have faith that that is real. I've never come across any Buddhist teaching, a lot that I don't necessarily understand or know how to do, but I've never come across any Buddhist teaching where I was like, yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that's wrong. I think my way is better. And I think the surrender part, to your question, and I think you can use the word surrender, that to me in practice is what it is surrendering the idea that this Jeff, this ego, knows best, because I don't. So those are my thoughts. What else? Yeah.
So in other religions, they worship,
Yeah.
but in the Buddhists say that they are a religion, so what do they worship? Just the teachings?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, you got to look at when the Buddha was alive, he was very clear that he didn't want people to worship him. He was very clear that he was just a human. And, you look at the definition of religion, it's a belief in a higher power, a God type figure, right? And that doesn't exist in. So by our Western Webster's dictionary of religious, description, Buddhism by definition is not a religion. Culturally, it is practiced religiously. So what they're, to me, what I was always taught when you were bowing to the Buddha, right? Bowing to the Buddha statue, making offerings, is that you're practicing this idea of non-self, which is it's not about you. So you don't have to worship the Buddha. As I always say, the Buddha can't help you. He died a long time ago. Worshipping him is not going to do you any good. So even in that practice, they're not worshiping him as if they're expecting him to heal them, save them, fix them, right? When we join palms at the beginning and we take refuge in the Triple Gem, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, when we take refuge, and to me, worshiping is the same idea translated into this practice of refuge. We're worshiping, we're taking refuge, safety, comfort, protection, and the idea that we all can awaken. We too have Buddha nature. That's what the Buddha taught. The Buddha was just a human, no different than us. He ate, he slept, he went to the bathroom, he got tired, no different than us. So if he could figure out how to end his suffering, so can we. So if you had to say, what are we worshiping? We're worshiping the belief that we too can end suffering. The big difference is, who has to do that for us? You. That's where the work comes in, And the same thing for the most part with all religions, right? The teachings themselves, I always say, if we all followed literally the words of Jesus Christ, we'd be a kinder, gentler world. The teachings themselves are not the problems. It's the people and what they do with them. And there's crazy Buddhists out there just the same. Buddhism is not free from madness. So, you're not worshiping and the offerings of the flowers and the fruit and the rice and anything you offer to the Buddhist statues and the shrines and things like that. It's the practice of generosity. It's the practice of recognizing there's something greater than you. Right? The first thing the Buddha said was to give. Give the Dharma, give kindness, love, compassion, joy. Give these things. That will alleviate your suffering. So come out of the sense of self, which we're all stuck in. What else? It's funny because years ago somebody asked Dalai Lama if this country needed more Buddhists. And he said the world has enough Buddhists. This country just needs more people that are peaceful and happy. So, that's why Buddhists don't care what you call it, religion, philosophy, a game, whatever. They don't really care. Just practice kindness and you're good.
Yeah. Going back to the faith question and doubt. Is it the right view is have the trust in the Four Noble Truths?
Yeah.
So that's where
the view.
You have a doubt, but that's what the faith comes in.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at, again, technically the Eightfold Path, right, which is the fourth of the Noble Truths. Those who haven't heard it, the first thing the Buddha said, life is filled with suffering. Doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means we're going to struggle a lot. Discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. The second is the cause, greed, anger, ignorance. So we practice generosity, compassion, wisdom. The third is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation, cessation of suffering. And the fourth is the Eightfold Path, and that is the right view, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. And the first one is the right view. That's what your question is. And so the right view is understanding that if we put these into practice, again, yes, coming back to the faith part, then everything after that follows. But if we can't get past the view that if for some reason we don't think generosity, compassion, and wisdom is a good path, then we're not going to get there. By not getting there, meaning we're going to continue to be miserable and make others miserable. If we continue to think that greed, anger, and ignorance, which is the cause of our suffering, is the path, then we're going to suffer. Yeah. What else?
I'm just curious what Buddhism says about angels.
Nothing.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the Buddha, it's often people ask about, Buddhist views on Jesus. And the Buddha lived 500 years before Jesus. So it wasn't much of a conversation, the kind of general view, I say this often, but is that a lot of Buddhist scholars, historians, what I would perceive as just great minds who've studied and taught Buddhism for the last 2,500 years, or 2,000 years specifically with this comment, they would say that Jesus was a Bodhisattva, a fully enlightened being who was here to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. As far as angels, I don't know. I guess as a Jewish kid, I'm just associating angels with Jesus, so I went to Jesus. But I've never read anything that Buddhism specifically has said about angels. But here's the thing with Buddhist practice, with all these questions, is if you have a belief in angels, if you have a belief in saints, if you have a belief in whatever religion you have, which probably 70, 80% of the people in this room do. Most, probably 80+% of the people that come to the Dharma Bum Temple, right, have a belief in a religion. And that's important. A friend of mine years ago was Catholic, and she said that when she learned about Buddhism, it actually made her a better Catholic, that it brought her closer to her Catholic faith. She called it a software upgrade. And I thought that was a beautiful application. Penny Bridges, the very Reverend Penny Bridges of St. Paul's Episcopal Church here in San Diego, right by Balboa Park, we do a lot of work with them, a lot of interfaith work. And when we accepted the Light of Pride Award, when they light up the cathedral during Pride Week, she said that there are a lot of Episcopalians that are better Episcopalians because of their time at the Dharma Bum Temple. And I thought that was such a beautiful just recognition of, a pretty powerful reverend honoring the beauty of these practices. And so I think to your questions, ultimately, who cares what Buddhists say about angels? Doesn't matter. What would matter is, what does your heart say about them? What does your belief say about them? How do they play into your life? And I think that, in essence, is the most, shatter Buddhism completely. Buddhism is just a construct, no different than anything else. It's an idea made up by some dude. I mean, if you really break it down, some dude made up a bunch of teachings. And 2,500 years ago, a lot of people still follow them. Millions of people all over the world. So my guess is they're pretty good, even though they came from a dude. But that's ultimately all it is. Yeah. I like angels. One more. We'll do one more before we close. Yeah.
You said you recommend going to maybe one of like the Thai or the other Buddhist temples.
Yeah.
From like a practical perspective, like, I don't know, maybe some anxiety, like, am I going to walk in and commit some faux pas or something?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So
Yeah. So I've just cleared that out, right? Now you don't have to be nervous about doing something you shouldn't do. You're just going in knowing you're going to do something you shouldn't do. So you can abandon that fear. You can embrace the fact that I'm going to walk in here and not understand anything and be completely clueless. And someone is going to come up to you. And first of all, and these are my generalizations, but I've been around Buddhism in San Diego for 20 years. And I love, I spent 3-4 years in a Taiwanese Buddhist temple. And every single time the average new person walked in, and after 3 minutes you would be doing something completely differently. It's not wrong, it's just different. And some sweet Taiwanese nun would come over and tell you how to bow, or how to wear your robe, or where to put your shoes, right? And your ego will be, shattered because somebody's telling you what to do. Man, you really want to practice? Go to a cultural Buddhist temple and just shut up and follow. For me, that was the greatest thing in the world, right? Was I okay with somebody telling me how to bow? Why not? Why shouldn't I be? At first, it was like, yo, I got this. I'm good. Well, that's the problem. I think I got this. I think I'm good. There lies the problem. So, you will absolutely do things, but they're happy. But let me say this. They're happy you're there. They welcome you. They're thrilled you're there. They won't know what to do with you. You won't know what to do when you're there. But it's such a beautiful experience. And I really wish people would go more. What you don't have at cultural Buddhist temples is people sitting around talking about all their problems in life. Let that sink in for a minute. All of us Western folks, welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. And this is coming from the guy who started this, so I get it. Always take that with a grain of salt when I make fun of all the people that are here, right? We come into this with like, oh, my life is miserable, I'm suffering, I'm so depressed, I'm so sad, I'm so anxious, the world is falling apart, everything's on fire, my religion isn't doing it for me, my family, whatever, help me, fix me, heal me, save me. And you end up here, right? None of that goes on in cultural Buddhist temples. No. They bow, they chant, they read the suit, chanting, meaning when they're chanting, what will sound like singing and sounding is really beautiful. It's actually really meditative, I find, especially because you don't understand it. But to actually not understand what's going on is the most incredible experience. Because what do you have to let go of? I kind of said it earlier, but your ego. Just surrender and be present in an experience. They're Buddhist monks and nuns. They're not going to harm you, right? So go in there, open-minded, open-hearted, right? Just smile. And just get over your shit. It's such a beautiful experience. But I was like, no, I can't go. What if they tell me I'm doing it wrong? They're going to tell you you're doing it wrong because you are. Which in essence is the same thing we do here, week in and week out. We're not all here because we're doing stuff right, folks. So please go. But in all truth, to close that thought for those who may be here for the first time, we literally created this place because what I saw there for those years was what I call the revolving door, where the average Western person would show up there, the bowing, the chanting, the robe, somebody telling them what to do, they'd go once or twice and they would leave and they wouldn't come back. And I really thought that was sad. And we really wanted to figure out how do we introduce Buddhist teachings in a way that's accessible to the Western person. Thus, the no bowing, the no chanting, the no robes, and we get to sit around and talk about all our problems and listen to the Buddhist teachings and help you solve them. Yeah? All right, I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for showing up. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. we're just practitioners. We do our best to take in our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those that show up. Every night, different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do the food distribution program. I still think it's one of the best things around here. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people asleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks, go feed people asleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. And if it doesn't work, just keep going back until it does. So other than that, first Saturday of every month, we do a half day of silence. That's 4 hours of silence, so 20 minutes. Talk about different meditation types. If 20 minutes of silent meditation is torture, I strongly recommend trying it for 4 hours. You'll love it. It's makes 20 minutes after that much easier, but it's about 20 minutes of meditation that just repeats with a 5-minute break for 4 hours. It starts up here, it moves downstairs, meditation hall, but that's the first Saturday of every month. There's a walking meditation outside, a cleaning, working meditation in there as well. So if you've never done that, I really suggest trying it. It's really cool. We have some people who literally just come here once a month for that. And we also need a few other people if anyone has done it or interested and wants to help lead it. We had a few people drop out recently, so we're looking for a few more people to lead. Otherwise, Buddha Food is downstairs if you need anything. Thanks for showing up. Be well.